landing strip for a Russian Antonov aeroplane. And we measured the thickness of the ice because you don't want this Antonov to land on thin ice and then all of a sudden disappear when the ice breaks, because the North Pole is ice floating on top of water. The South Pole is ice on top of a continent. So, the North Pole is an ocean. We call it the Arctic Ocean. So, before I brought in the Antonov aircraft, I had to make sure that the ice was thick enough to carry its weight. I measured the ice was 2 meters, 58 centimeters thick. And that was good enough for the Antonov to land. The Antonov landed, we did a research base called Barnio on the North Pole, and for 1 month we researched carbon, microplastics, algae growing on the ice, and basically recorded the speed and the movement of the ice. 14 years later, in 2019, I had this crazy idea to become the first person in the world to cross the Arctic Ocean, leaving from Alaska, and for a period of 138 days during winter, cross the polar ocean over the top of the world to Svalbard on the other side. It's only about 2,300 kilometers, but in complete darkness. I arrived on the North Pole. I measured the ice on the North Pole 14 years later. There was 8 centimeters of ice. So meaning from 2 meters 50 to 8 centimeters, there's a big change. And the older ice now has left the North Pole, is drifting into the northern Atlantic Ocean, and is replaced with younger first-year ice. And imagine we close all the windows and all the doors, and we turn off the air conditioning in this auditorium. What's going to happen? It's going to heat up. So the only way to cool it down again is to open the windows and open the doors and turn on the air conditioning for us to be comfortable. The poles are the windows and the doors of the world. That cools us down, that keeps us comfortable. If the ice melts on the North Pole, we're all finished.
So when Mike told me all these stories, that he just only has 100, we can stay here the whole afternoon with similar stories. We decided to create these 5 pieces. And then we decided to create this ILA by ID last year, which was our first concept, which is close to be 100%. But it was only 30 pieces. So it doesn't really change the face of the world. So learning what we did with this concept watch, we decided to create the e-steel, which was in our industry the very first steel which was 95% recycled. And we decided to create last year the Luminor e-steel as a one-shot program. This year we are bringing what you have seen in that movie, an additional product family which is a submersible e-steel having the same principle. Having learned a lot of things the last 12 months, in the future Panerai has committed during that show that all our steel in Panerai will be switched to e-steel before 2025, meaning that 75% of the quantities we are producing in our company will be associated with recycled material, which is e-steel. On the additional story, which Mike was also on, you, Francesca, were big promoters. Alone, we will not be successful in the watch industry. That's why we love to be surrounded by other industries. As you with Pada, plus all the scientists you have in the world, as you was connecting me with many other industries to get their best practice. And for example, at Panerai, we decided last year that what we have lost 3 years to look at for these recycled materials, we were for the first time opening our ecosystem to all our competitors. So I repeat it again here, if there are anybody working in our competition fields, that our manufacturer is ready to welcome any people who have a goodwill to also evolve in a recycled business model. And we will give you our suppliers network, and we'll give you the protocol on how we do it, so that you avoid to lose 3 years of research and development. And we are very proud because in the months to come, other big operators in watches will announce also recycled steels as their future platform. Tell us a little bit, Francesca, about this network of companies coming from different industries can fight in the same direction.
Well, what you said is just amazing because that's what, for example, also science is doing now. You know, the pandemic taught us that we need to collaborate more, to open science, to open data. So that's what we are trying to do, to create a notion that is accessible to everyone, that is transparent, we call it. Transparent in a sense that we can see, we can learn. So that's what we are trying to do together, to develop resources for everybody to be more knowledgeable about the ocean.
The Ocean Commission, for the ones of you who don't necessarily know, is a connector of scientists on one side, resources from private companies, on putting these projects together to come to a result. Now this is what Mike is also doing, because Mike has different hats, he doesn't have only this one. He has also many other activities in addition to Panerai, where he is working also on these hydrogen engines, on being exposed also to other brands like Nespresso, because you also are an ambassador for Nespresso.
I think that, like Francesca said, we all have to have the same philosophy as UNESCO. We don't have to be UNESCO, but we've got to follow an organized pattern to be able to get the industry to think alike. The moment that you start thinking alike is the moment that we can work together. If we don't even think alike, how can we work together? And I think that the way that we try and get together is that all of us in our specific fields has a certain role to play. And we need to play a role to be able to influence the maximum of people. And today, when I gave a piece of my boat, you guys can see that boat. I sailed 27 times around the world. I sailed the highest up into the Arctic Ocean, to 85 degrees north. I sailed to the South Pole, and the rudder that actually steered this boat sailed 27 times around the world. When I had to replace the rudder stock, I called Jean-Marc and I said, listen, we can't throw this away. We've got to give it a second life. And that's where the idea of recycling metals really started. And today we know that we can make a difference with the knowledge that UNESCO can give us, partnerships in the industry, and what we see change in the environment. And together, I believe that it's not brands that's loose standing anymore. That is, your competition must be your biggest friends. And once you can make your competition your friend, then I think we will start doing sustainable business.
We also have our own boat, which is named Aileen, which doesn't have anything to do with the pictures you have seen from Pontroué. It's a vintage boat. And on this boat, we have a lot of bronzo parts. You probably know that Panerai has a bronzo collection, which is probably the most looked after collection in the world. You will not find it in our stores because we have a waiting list for all these models. The last edition we did was also recycled bronzo, because we used a spare part of Aileen that we had to replace in bronzo to be able to build our last edition. So from the business stories or the success stories of the micro edition we did with Pontroué, we also did the Aileen story. I know that a lot of you journalists were asking me, but is recyclability can be associated to luxury? You know, it's a question we also had internally. Because at Panerai we recognize something, in that this journey behind recyclability is something we don't know today. We open new doors every day, and if we know very well how to produce watches since years based on the historical business model, we learn every day when it comes to recyclability. And the story with all of you guys is to learn every day about how to improve the processes, how to make it happen, and how to generate new concepts in the future, which can be based on that story of recyclability. What I can propose you now is that I'm sure you have questions. Such as, for example, is it associated to luxury? But I can tell you that nobody asks us today, among journalists or new customers who come to our boutique, can that be associated to luxury, any recycled concept? People ask us in the boutiques today, why you don't extend that quicker on the rest of your assortment? Nobody asks us questions about how can that be associated to any luxury activities. I invite you for any questions you want to have for the UNESCO representative or Mike or myself, any questions you want to know about Panerai. You always wanted to ask us. The first question being always the most challenging.
Hi, Jean-Marc. So if by 2025, 30% of the collection will be designed using recycled materials, are you planning for Panerai to be able to create another material or similar materials, such as e-steel, perhaps using bronze or gold?
So the door of recyclability that we work now with new suppliers. So the biggest challenge for us was twice. Number one, to create an ecosystem of suppliers following us. You can have the best ideas ever. If you are not having all the supply chain networks of companies that you can elevate to that new type of project, you are lost. So working with 10 new suppliers, among which some of them never worked in the watch industry before, makes them also considering the watch industry as a potential customer. And then they open us new books of new materials. And that is what we are looking at for the time being. And that now that we have decided to go for the e-steel program, is to consider future materials which can also be applied for a future as well. You know that we have many new materials as part of the Panerai development.
Just to add to that a little bit, I think that when we speak about recyclability of giving a second life to products that we have, we're not necessarily speaking about inferior quality. What we're speaking about is we value the quality and we give it a second life. Now, that's where people must understand that recycled materials will cost a little bit more, but it's an investment into the future of our planet. If you're willing to invest today to save the planet, we need to change the industry. So that means in mobility, that means in luxury goods, that means in transport, in aviation, whatever goes with a greener way of living will not necessarily be cheaper today, but will be a little bit more expensive. And I think our kids, the younger generation, will benefit from what we invest into the planet.
To create one e-steel case, to follow what you are saying, we have losses for another case. So all the beauty of the manufacturer of e-steel is to capture these losses from the watch and the medical industry, because the two providers of our e-steel today comes from the watch industry, the losses of material, and the losses of material in the medical industry. And as Mike is saying, of course, all that network that we need to create to be able to capture these losses takes time, takes energy, plus we don't have the critical size. If I want that our competitors are joining us, it's because together we are going to create new best practice. Because I also anticipate that the competitors who will present recycled steel in the future are also ready to share their best practice with us in the future.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. So fragile ecosystems also have a lot of impact on indigenous communities around the world. So I was just wondering if you can shed some light as to how Panerai is going out and valuing indigenous communities as well.
The communities, I'm not sure of the indigenous communities. My indigenous communities, yes.
I think Francesca.
Well, I've been talking a lot about scientific knowledge, but also we value a lot of local knowledge because, you know, ocean literacy, so being more knowledgeable about the ocean, that not only comes from science, but comes also from our interaction with the ocean and seafarers, fishers. They interact every day with the ocean, so sometimes they even know better than scientists. So indigenous knowledge, local knowledge is absolutely key to find the right solution, especially because, of course, these are global topics, global issues, but in the end we need to find local solutions. And to find local solution, there's no one-size-fits-all solution. So we need to work with the indigenous people and local communities because they have the right knowledge, together with the scientists, to drive the right solutions.
I think adding to that as well, sailing and being present on the ocean, especially around Indonesia and overfishing. We speak overfishing, how is that actually influencing local communities? local communities changed the way they would fish. So where they before used nets, they would now use dynamite, and dynamite would blow up the coral. So first of all, it changes the way that they live and they sustain their lives. To be able to use dynamite, you blow up the coral, no fish will ever come back there, and it's not sustainable in the longevity of behavior of humans on the planet. And I think that we have a massive role that we play on indigenous ways of living. When I crossed the Amazon jungle, I walked for 6 months on the equator across the Amazon jungle, and I had to live off nature. I learned from the indigenous people how to hunt, how to stay alive. Today, 20 years later, they don't do it anymore because their life has become dependent on a supply chain. And I think those changes that is happening so fast today that we've got to think of how you supply products to indigenous communities that they can have their best knowledge of survival and living off nature and keeping nature in harmony still intact. But the moment you lose that is the moment that you lose contact with nature.
The next question.
Hi, Marc. Hi, everybody. As you're talking about sustainability, all the circular economy topic is included. So can you please describe us all the partnership that we also have you presented in Watchfinder?
Yeah, we are hosting, for the ones of you who haven't yet visited our Panerai portal, we are hosting for the first time our Friends of Watchfinder. Watchfinder is a Richmond company which is very much involved in the second-hand business. We at Panerai recognize we don't know the business. We at Panerai know that there is a big demand for second-hand Panerai watches because at Watchfinder, Panerai is one of their top brands. Hosting them allows us to have people who are able to buy new Panerai by selling their old Panerai or other brands. And we're very happy to present for the first time here on this fair because also they are showing submersible watches we don't have anymore in our assortment. So in addition to all the submersible watches we have, which is a big innovation of this fair, these guys at Watchfinder make us enjoying what has been some historical editions, among which one is from Marc, on the Panerai world.
I think it's amazing you don't like your Rolex, you can just trade it for Panerai. Or you don't like a Panerai, just trade it for another Panerai.
This you're not entitled to say.
Oh, sorry.
So the next question. But before we have the next question, for example, our packaging is another story because at Panerai we don't work only on the products. We have created at Panerai for the 740 employees we have a program named Panerai Ecological. That embarks all the different people in our company. You can be in the accounting department. You can be in the supply department. The product is of course, top of the iceberg. But we work, for example, in packaging. Panerai has decided and announced it during that show that from 2023, all our packaging will be half of the size of what it was before, and they will be entirely recycled. We are promoting public transport, biking to come to work. We are penalizing, including me, the ones who come by car by paying for car park when we come to our companies. There are many activities like that, like favoring boat instead of airplane. We have learned, all of us, during the last 2 years, how to use Zoom and Teams instead of always traveling around the world. So there are lots of initiatives in our company to be able to improve our carbon result at the end of the year. We have 3 minutes and 19 seconds to go ahead because they have horrified me with sleep time, which has to be perfectly at 30 minutes. So is there any last question you want to ask to Marc, to Francesca, or myself? One last question. Someone here?
So I have a question for Mr. Marc. So from one side, you're working with Panerai in the journey of sustainability, but you have also like your own project linked to sustainability and expeditions.
So what we've done is, through our 30 years of exploration, once you cross both poles and you climb a little bit of the highest mountains and you sail 27 times around the world and you swam down the Amazon and you walk 3 times around the world, the world's become very small. And you try and find a bigger purpose in life. And the bigger purpose is basically the knowledge of what I've experienced in my life as an explorer. And I get asked every day by young people, how can they participate to have an impact on the planet? And big organizations don't always give them the possibility to give their ideas and their knowledge to saving the world and saving the oceans. So I've created a platform where any young PhD student, master's degree student can propose a project that's related to the ocean. And then what we do, we've got a jury that's 60 professional professors, doctors, engineers, businessmen that looks at these projects, and then they select 10 projects that they basically take into maturity. So from an idea to an actual project that we can do in the oceans and apply it everywhere around the world. So that's part of what we do. So today we are busy by creating one of the world's biggest youth environmental platforms. And then I wanted to change mobility, so I went to the CEA in Grenoble. The CEA is the Commission d'Énergie Atomique et Énergie Alternative, and I developed a fuel cell. So with 6,000 engineers working on the development of a fuel cell, today we have a product that can change mobility and decarbonize by 2030. So we need to industrialize it and then start producing it. So we can put it in boats, buses, trains, planes, and start actively promoting a clean environment.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to tell you about sustainability.
Thank you everyone for these very inspiring keynotes. I know that when it's passion, talking, speaking, we could be there all day with a lot of pleasure actually.